Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Carmen Estate Gesha Natural Processed Panama from Datura Coffee. And there's the box right there. And Datura, based out of Paris, France. And they're a coffee roaster that's appeared on this channel on several occasions, including our recent review of the Yirgacheffe Kilbesa, a wash-processed Ethiopian coffee. And in the same way that I made it a point to review that coffee, giving us an opportunity to try out one of Datura's standard offerings, I also made it a point to review this coffee, as this gives us an opportunity to try out another one of Datura's natural processed coffees. And given that I had such great success with that natural processed Gesha Village coffee, I really wanted to see if that was a little bit of a fluke or if I just really happen to like Datura's natural processed coffees. So it'll definitely be interesting to see how this one turned out, as this right here is day 55. And recipe we went with for this coffee was our standard recipe at a 16:1 water to coffee ratio, brewed at 96 degrees Celsius, about 205 degrees Fahrenheit. And I like this one best through the V60, which indicates a more medium fine grind. Roast profile for this coffee. We have discussed Datura's profile a little bit in depth in some of our previous reviews, as relative to some of their European contemporaries, they are on the more light side of things. There are definitely those ultralight roasters out there, including their very own city contemporary in Substance that does roast a little bit lighter than them. But compared to some of their other city contemporaries like Kawa, you can see that their coffees on the whole tend to be a little bit lighter than that as well. And for that reason, we do identify them as being on the more moderately to very light side of things by most standards and metrics. With all that out of the way, let's go ahead and start discussing this coffee. Day 29, first impression through the V60, and the coffee was immediately off to a very nice start, as it's offering enough intensity for a natural while maintaining the level of clarity for a wash processed coffee, as it does have a lovely red berry at the forefront in a clean sense, with plenty of the listed stone fruit qualities on the back end. In addition to that, some Gesha-like qualities in terms of the citric presentation, as the coffee is very direct and lovely right off the bat. And I'll be completely honest, it was a little bit of a red flag for me going into this one, seeing the red fruit note right at the forefront of this one. And I was concerned that that might translate in a slightly heavier sense, but all of my concerns were alleviated based off of this very first try. As I said, this coffee in general tends to present a little bit softer for a natural, which works well for me, especially given that it's not sacrificing any of the overall intensity to it. So very happy with this first impression. Let's go ahead and move on to day 32, as we opted for the Chemex. And the coffee was nice once again, as it's continuing to offer great intensity, but a washed level of clarity, as it is very clean. Very well defined and layered, with a slight tart berry at the forefront, but also a very well defined white peach in the finish. Definitely much more of a sugary quality in that sense. In addition to that, the Gesha-like characteristics continue to remain present, with an excellent florality and citric quality, so it was nice yet again, and these first two impressions continued to alleviate any of my concerns about this one being a natural processed coffee, as it also validated my assumption that I just really happen to like Datura's natural processed coffees. So on day 35, we opted for the UFO brewer, and the coffee was the most intense it had been to this point, as it's a little bit more fermenty this time, closer to being in line with the listed red fruit qualities. Outside of that, more tropical in general, as there is a slight passion fruit and pineapple quality, both of which present in a slightly heavier sense. But outside of that, there's a little bit less of those Gesha-like characteristics, so not necessarily my favorite experience for this coffee as of this moment. Day 38, through the V60 with Datura's recipe, so a 14.2:1 at 93 degrees Celsius. And the coffee is better than the previous day, as some of those heavier aspects were toned down, as it's definitely a little bit cleaner. But there was also a strange lingering saltiness, which wasn't replicated from any of the experiences that we had from this point going forward. So I feel like there was some sort of cross-contamination or something that happened, because it was obscurely salty. Outside of that, it does present a very clean sense, with a combination of lighter colored citrus as well as stone fruit qualities. Day 41, through the Chemex with the same adjustments, and the coffee is still turning out very well, as it's a very clean representation once again. The saltiness from the previous day is all but gone, confirming that there was likely some sort of brewing error or contamination error, as the coffee is clean enough to be reminiscent of a wash processed coffee with plenty of the listed peach. And I was really surprised at just how much there was of that listed white peach quality, because I think it's one of the things they have listed towards the back end of the descriptor of this coffee, but even then it was pretty well pronounced for me throughout the entirety of this coffee. Day 44 through the V60 with our standard recipe, and it was a little tough to tell which brew method we did prefer, as this is yet again a solid representation of this coffee with great tropical intensity, but enough clarity to balance that out. Passion fruit and pineapple both were presented this time around in a cleaner sense, so I didn't mind that they were maybe a little bit more abundant than they had been in some of the earlier days, largely because they also continue to remain cleaner in general. Day 48, final notes we have through the V60 with our standard recipe, and the coffee was the best it had been to this point, giving credence to the fact that it probably just needed a little bit more rest overall, as there's great depth to it. Plenty of the listed berry at the forefront once again, as well as some tropicality, including the listed tangerine, but also passion fruit, pineapple, a cleaner lychee characteristic. Peach does shine through in both the sugary white peach sense, but also the fresh yellow peach quality, and also a perfumey but clean lavender and jasmine-like florality to it. Tasting wheel is actually very complicated. We'll kind of get into that in just a moment here, but there was definitely a lot of depth to this coffee, all of which still presented in a much more clean sense. All right, so let's go ahead and put up that tasting wheel so you can see what we're getting. And we have one level 5, so let's go through that real quick, and that is the sweetness level 5. I mentioned that there's a lot in this tasting wheel that's kind of complicated, and actually we have 2 level 5s, the sweetness and the florality, both of which at the level 5. So both of those things were somewhere between a 4 and the 5, and it's going to be kind of the same thing with a lot of the other things we're discussing, but since we're starting with these, we'll kind of go into that a little bit more. It was very sweet for what this coffee was. It presents in a very clean sense, and the intensity that does come from it is just super sugary and sweet, enough to justify it being on the lower side of that level 5 mark. Same thing with the florality. The floral presentation of this coffee is very pretty and it's very abundant, and since the base of this one is so clean, it can be justified at that level 5 mark. I mentioned 2 things specifically, a clear lavender and jasmine like florality to it, so both of those did push this and bump this one all the way up there to that level 5 mark. But sweetness, same thing. Both of them probably lower side of the level 5, higher side of level 4, but they were just there enough to bump them up all the way to that level 5 mark. Let's go ahead and move on to those level 4s. Cleanliness level 4, I did mess around with keeping that one somewhere between a 4 and a 5, as it possibly could have justified itself at that level 5 mark too. Higher side of the level 4, the presentation of the qualities in this one are very well defined, enough to the point where I wouldn't have had an issue putting it there at the level 5. So it's a very complicated tasting wheel in that sense. The finish level 4, it's another thing where I said, okay, it does have a very lingering, beautiful, sweet finish to it, as well as floral finish. So this is one that I'm toying somewhere between a level 4 and a level 5. So yeah, this tasting wheel, just kind of tricky, especially at the top. Acidity level 3, another thing. There's enough of that tropical acidity to push that one up to level 4, and I even thought about that too, but I think it's subdued enough to keep it there at the level 3. Higher side of the level 3 nonetheless, but I think originally I'd also put that there at the level 4. That's the complicated part of this tasting wheel. Let's go ahead and move on because it gets a lot easier from here. Berry fruit level 4, and there is the red berry quality listed right at the forefront of this quality, and I saw it actually presented a little bit more in that lychee-like sense, so there is a slight tartness to the berry quality in it. So I see both of those things, but they're very clean. There is nothing that would indicate any sort of heaviness in that red fruit sense. So level 4, where we opted to put that, coupled with a very high level of cleanliness, is actually a very nice win for me. Citrus fruit level 4. They do have a tangerine note listed on here. I can definitely see that, but there is a little bit more of that citric tropicality as well. So passion fruit, pineapple, both of which can be justified putting there at that level 4 for the citric qualities of this one. And then the stone fruit level 4, very happy with it, presenting both the yellow and white peach qualities and characteristics to it, especially in that sweeter sense. So even though I'm not the biggest fan of white peach, and at times when it's presented in coffee, I have mixed feelings on it, I'm very happy that it was accompanied by a little bit more of a yellow peach quality to go with it as well. And then that kind of takes us into the last thing worth discussing, which is the body level 1. It was very light bodied nonetheless, so not a lot of texture to it. It is a Gesha coffee, but even then I considered that maybe it would be a little bit higher, given that it was brewed with the V60 and that it is a natural processed coffee, but level 1 is where it ended, as it definitely had a lighter body to it. So as I'm looking at this tasting wheel, I think it's a fluctuating representation, especially at the top of what I was getting from this coffee. All right, so my overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee, I was very happy with it. I really appreciated the depth that it offered. I really appreciated the intensity that it offered, and I appreciated the clarity first and foremost for what this one did offer, which does validate the sentiment that I really enjoy Datura's natural processed coffees. Granted, they've both been higher end natural processed coffees. I do have to state and note that I tried to get a natural processed standard offering as well, as I felt like that was going to kind of combine both of the other things I was looking for, your standard offerings and your natural offerings, to see how it turned out. But I think Airworks was unable to get that coffee for me, which is a little unfortunate because I'm kind of curious to see how that would have turned out. But even with these both being higher end natural processed coffees, I was very happy with both of the ones that we've had from them, this one and that Gesha Village, which isn't always the case. I have so many high-end natural processed offerings from so many coffee roasters that I just don't enjoy whatsoever. But what seems to stand out about both the naturals from Datura is that they're very clean. They are both presented in a very clean sense, as I got minimal to no fermentiness and heaviness from either of the two of them. And of the two, this is probably the one I would have expected significantly more of from it, and I never got to the point where I felt it was overbearing, heavy, fermenty, or in jeopardy of going below that level 4 in terms of cleanliness. So massive credit to Datura on this one. This is probably my favorite natural processed Panamanian coffee that we've reviewed this year. It's in too stacked of a category. We've had some phenomenal wash processed Panamanian Geshas this year, so it's not that much of a strong contender to compete in the Panamanian category this year. But for what it is, natural Panama coffee, amazing, and that continues to give credence to my belief that Datura is actually one of the best natural roasting coffee roasters out there. The type of person I would suggest this coffee to, it presents very well. So if you are the type of person that likes the same sort of coffees that I do, so I like to focus on the big 4 things: cleanliness, florality, fruit, and sweetness. This one offered all of those in a cleaner, intense, and pretty well defined as well as complex, deeper sense. So it does offer all of the fruit qualities to it. It does have some very nice cleanliness throughout the entirety of it, higher side for what this coffee is, with plenty of intensity and sweetness, and also a very high level of florality. So that's kind of the best direction I can point somebody towards on this one, and also the best way I can leave this review. If you by chance had an opportunity to try this coffee, I'd love to know your thoughts and impressions of it as well. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. This right here has been a review of the Carmen Estate Natural Processed Panama from Datura Coffee. Thank you for watching.